All right. Good evening, everybody. It is 7 p.m. I am calling this meeting of the Durham Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission to order. This is the December 2024 meeting. We will start in a moment with introductions, but first I would like to ask Nathan Lee if he would please read the land acknowledgement, which I will put up on the agenda in just a second. Hopefully you can see it.
Yep.
Go ahead at your leisure.
Right. We, as the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, want to begin this meeting by affirming BPAC's commitment to equity and racial justice. We would like to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on lands that have served as the home for diverse Indigenous communities long before current governments were established here. We pay our respect to the elders and members of these communities, both past and present, and recognize the harms of genocide and colonialism. We will make a conscious effort to reflect on the following questions as we advance through our business and contemplate changes in our community, and we recognize that achieving equity requires our commitment to an ongoing process. How can we seek to repair harm with our work and not erase history? How does our work impact the vulnerability and safety of people who hold many intersecting marginalized identities, including Black, Indigenous, and people of color, people with disabilities, and lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning people? How can we prioritize and center people in our decision-making? How can we be more responsive to local needs? And how can our work build community, power, and shared decision-making?
Thank you very much. With that, we will move on to the main part of the agenda, which is introductions. I will stop sharing my screen for a moment so that I can see everybody. And I'll start with myself, and then I'll go around the screen as I see you. I'm Brian Hawkins. I've been on BPAC since 2022, and I have served as the 2024 chair of this commission. I also serve on the DevRev committee, which I'll continue to do, but I will be chair until the end of the month officially and functionally until the end of this meeting. Up next, appropriately enough, Mary Rose.
I am Mary Rose Fontana. I am the bicycle community representative from the county side. I am the incoming chair, and I have been on BPAC for about a year and a half, and I participate on the planning and policy committee.
Thank you very much. Nathan.
Hi, I'm Nathan Lee. I am the Duke Liaison County seat, and I am also the chair of the Planning and Policy Subcommittee, and I've been on since last summer.
Thank you. John.
John Lawler. I represent the county. I've been on the committee, on the advisory council since September, and on the development review committee.
Thank you. New tonight, Rosie.
Hi, I'm Rosie Edmonds. I'm, as he said, new. I'm the youth representative, and I was oriented today. So, yep.
Welcome. Great. Ed, please go next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ed Rizzuto. I am a county appointee filling the disability advocacy seat. I've been on the commission since 2018, and I participate in the community engagement committee work.
Thank you very much. Maggie, please go next.
Hi, I'm Maggie Green. I represent the Recreation, Urban Trails, and Greenways. I am also on the Community Outreach Committee, and this is my second meeting.
Great. Scott.
Yeah, hi, I'm Scott Carter, and I've been on BPAC for 2+ years, and I'm the chair of the Development Review Committee.
Thank you. Christian.
Hello, hello. I'm Christian Velasquez. I joined BPAC this past August, and I've been attending the Community Engagement Committee.
Thank you. Christopher.
I'm Chris Perlstein. I am the City Transportation Planning Policy slot, I believe. I'm also the secretary, and I mostly try to work on the Planning and Policy Subcommittee, though I've been trying to also pay attention to DevRev or Development Review and kind of get involved and help there because I know that they've got a large workload, but I've been failing at that lately.
Okay, we appreciate the effort. Landon.
Hi, everyone. My name is Landon Balcom. I've been on BPAC for, I think, going on 2 years now. And I participate in the Development Review Committee.
Thank you. Hannah.
Sure, there's only one Hannah today. So Hannah Salvaggio, I'm the BPAC staff liaison and the bike and pedestrian planner with the city.
Fantastic. Andres.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andres Otero. I'm a county representative, and I'm sat on BPAC since July of 2023.
Thank you. Trent.
Good evening, Trent Cormier. I've been on BPAC for about 6 months now, and I'm on the DevRev committee, and I don't have a camera tonight. Sorry. Thanks.
Right, all right. Thanks for coming. Tony.
Thank you, Brian. I'm Tony Reedy. I'm an at-large member from the county. I serve on the Planning and Policy Committee. And like Trent, I forgot my laptop, so I don't have a camera today. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Thank you both for being here anyway. Is that everybody? I haven't missed anybody, have I? We're a little lean tonight. Hannah, do we have any excused absences?
So Wendy Jacobs, the county Board of Commissioners, she let me know that she's not able to come. Granted, I don't think her liaison position started till January, but she's the only one that I know of.
Okay, and I know Hannah Bartlebau kind of had an emergency come up and emailed us very recently. And we're missing her, Jeff. I always feel bad when I can't remember who else is not here, but 2 more by my count.
Royal,
yes, thank you. And I
Trey.
can see him, but I can't think of his name.
Trey.
Thank you. Okay. I mean, for December meetings is actually pretty good turnout. So thank you all for being here. We may have a short meeting tonight. So no promises, but I'll do what I can. Let's see. Update on new members. Hannah, I think we've kind of already touched upon it, but I'll still let you do the honors. And also, do we have any vacancies?
we do not have any vacancies. Woohoo! So that's exciting. We are full. And our most recent member is Rosie Edmonds. And so really excited to have her on. She is representing the youth representative position with the city. And so, yeah, excited to have her bring her energy and just a different perspective. Then we also have, as mentioned a second ago, Wendy Jacobs, who is now the new Board of County Commissioners liaison, so replacing Heidi. And she said that the next meeting in January plans to attend. So yeah, looking forward to that. And then earlier this evening, Andres actually mentioned that he might have to cycle off a little bit earlier than his position ends, which is June, I think is when his position, the county youth representative, so Rosie's position, but on the county side. And so Andres said that maybe February would be potentially his last time. So January, we would want to make sure that the social media side kind of gets that transition with the community engagement committee. So that's all I have on my side, and then when that position does become available, I guess just already we should maybe start putting some feelers out there for anyone who knows of youth. So maybe Rosie, you could help with that now.
And for the record, remind us, what's our age cap on that?
24,
24, thank you.
which is on the high side, but, yeah.
Elder youth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
I'm elder youth.
We all are at heart, right? Okay, cool. Fantastic. Does anybody have any adjustments to the agenda other than the fact that I said we were approving October's minutes this month? It's actually November's. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to throw out there that I've dropped the ball slightly on the minutes. So the minutes are kind of in a little bit of a rough shape where I took notes as best as I could during the meeting, and then what I usually do is I follow up with the recording afterwards. I don't know if it was me just forgetting the order of things or holiday stuff, but I think the recording didn't get posted for like a week or two.
Okay.
Plus there was Thanksgiving stuff. So I would like to go back and clean up the minutes more than what is currently on there. I don't know if we have a way to do that. It is not up to what I usually like to have quality wise. So apologies for being late on that.
Okay.
Not sure how we can handle that, or if it's good enough, or
I think we should probably wait till the minutes are complete before we approve them. And sometimes things don't get uploaded to the website on time, and I think it would be better to upload complete ones than incomplete ones.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I would like to do. So
from my perspective, I think it's better to just approve them next month.
Yep.
Any objections to that?
No, we've done that before.
I figured as much. So, okay, well, we
I'm
can
not the
move
first
on.
one.
we can move on. It's a procedural thing. I think we're okay. Great. Well, that helps us move on then to the public comment period. And as far as I can tell, we have no members of the public here. So we can skip that part too, right? Yes. Okay. Cool. That gets us to old business, which is the CIP. So I want to thank all of the committees and the committee chairs for taking time out of their meetings to discuss this month. I was at all 3 meetings this month, and there were good discussions had all around. Let me pull up something I threw together very quickly earlier this evening. Wait, what did I just share? Let me try that again. Hopefully you're seeing an Excel sheet. Is that what everybody's seeing?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So I just went straight down the working document and came up with short summaries for all of these. So the order you see them on the spreadsheet is the order they're listed on the working document if you want to ping over and see more details. But hopefully, since we've all talked about this should be pretty familiar. And pretty much what I highlighted 2 things. One, which I'll just call out, is here in the whatever color this is. The land acquisition for the Roxborough Rail Trail is definitely a county ask. And I think there's good consensus that we want to support that. So I kind of encourage the committees not to spend any time talking about it, because we're definitely going to do it in a separate letter to the county. We do have some support also for listing as a potential line item improvements to bus shelters, which I think mostly falls under the county. I think some may fall under the city as well. But if we're sending a letter to the county anyway, I see no reason not to include that. Tony, please go ahead if you have a question.
I didn't have a question. I did just want to mention that Dave Connolly from DOST and I have met with the city and the county about the Roxborough Rail Trail, and Durham City has the money set aside in their CIP. The county has a different process and would like us to support their request for acquisition funding for the trail. Both Dave and I have asked the city and the county to send us suggested language.
Okay.
And we expect that we've asked to get that be in early January before the January meetings of DOST and BPAC. And so what we would like to ask is to have a coordinated request from both committees that integrates what the city and the county are planning to do. And so I do not have the wording yet, but I will have it well before our January meeting.
Okay, I think that's in plenty of time. I don't expect us to finalize our language tonight. What I do hope we do is finalize our priorities.
Yeah,
So-
so there's very good news on this. The county expects to have money, in the city, as I think you are said and know, it's already got the money set aside. And we just have to be patient. The railroad is not expected to sign the deed until November, so almost a year from now.
Okay. Carl, go ahead.
Hey, Brian, thanks. Sorry to join late. I just want to say, Tony, that's great work. I think you're doing the right thing, and I think it's great organizing. So I look forward to seeing the stuff you want to share with the city, but I think you're doing it right. You're sort of, and the timeline is right. So good job.
Okay. So that's great. I guess the other thing I want to highlight here is we had support from at least 2 committees on, I think that's 5 items. So those are the ones that are emboldened and also highlighted in green. Those are briefly consultant for design details, primarily for multi-use paths. That came out of an ongoing discussion in the DevRev subcommittee. Another one was the acquisition of NCDOT streets in downtown. That is take ownership and ongoing responsibility for their maintenance so that the city can do what we want with them without having to ask NCDOT. There's also broad support for the legal tactical urbanism idea modeled on a program in, I believe, Atlanta. And we've had some discussions about. Another kind of consensus item was trail signage that we requested in tandem with our letter to the city council about e-bikes on trails. And then lastly, something we're going to talk about a little bit in a minute, which is the new Durham schools policy about busing that I think goes into effect in January, where basically they're not providing bus service to anyone within a mile of schools anymore. So something that we've kind of added to this list was, if that's going to be the case, then every crosswalk within a mile of a school needs to be marked. There should be no unmarked crosswalks. And I think there's pretty broad support among the commission for that. Other 2 items that came up from at least one committee were more funding for physical bike lane protection, vertical protection. And another idea was to ask for money for dedicated staff to deal with traffic calming. So if we take the county ones as written, that gives us 5 for sure to go to the city, with another potential 2. The number I had in my head as a target was 6. I am totally fine with doing 5, and I'm also totally fine with doing all 7, but I would like to open the floor to comments or questions on that, if any. Don't all raise your hands at once.
I have one that I think we may have forgotten about, and therefore it wasn't discussed in any of the committees, was the potential to continue fare-free transit for Go Durham, which was a budget request last year, and it wasn't on the CIP list from city transportation, so that could be why we forgot about it.
Okay.
Yeah, but I believe they are requesting that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm happy to throw that into consideration. Does anybody have any thoughts on that item specifically, pro or con?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to Mary Rose for, I think you mentioned that maybe earlier, or maybe the last meeting. That's a good one. I just asked Sean Egan about this last week to get a sense of whether that was in the budget he was requesting from the manager. And I got a kind of a cryptic message. I couldn't quite decipher it. So I think it's good that like BPAC's talking about that. I know that the city will be talking about it. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was a big chunk of county funds last year from sort of like the last chunk of ARPA funds that helped to fund that. So I think there is a question about where we'll get the funds. So I think I'm going to work hard on that, but I think it's good that BPAC supports that and sort of raises that up. So thanks for noting that.
Yeah, and I think there was an issue, maybe not an issue, but yeah, there's funds that are ending from
Exactly.
COVID relief. So
Okay, Chris.
Yeah, I kind of want to follow up with like it's kind of a more nuanced, I think, item from my perspective. Like I absolutely 100% support the ideal of like having completely fare free transit, and from what I remember, it was such a low portion of the total bus budget. It made a lot of sense. But at the same time, like if we've got funding that's disappearing, one of my big concerns is what does that mean for bus service? And I think a lot of cities have kind of gone down multiple paths here. And sometimes if like that fare free is taking away money that could go to like higher frequency, there's some kind of debate about which is the more beneficial option. And it's kind of a tough conversation. I don't really have a strong opinion on which way that goes. I'd love to see fare free continue, but I also am realistic about the potential consequences of funding disappearing. So that would be my concern, is like if I don't know have a handle on funding sources that are covering that, and what the long range thing is, and what the what's the word for it, consequences are. I guess I don't know what the right word I'm looking for. Can't come up with it off the top of my head, but what the downsides are that are going to come with funding that has to be allocated from other things, potentially due to funding decreases from other sources. So I'd want a handle on that before being able to strongly support it, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Okay. Anyone else?
So this is Scott Carter. I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand.
Right.
So I had two things. One of them was we discussed briefly cycle tracks, and I think if we could maybe enhance that one comment to say two-way cycle tracks along with protected bike lanes, just feels like we're not really considering that. And I think based on my experience in some other cities, it's worth taking a look at. And maybe in certain roads, it's a better fit than a bike lane each direction, or maybe more efficient use of space or something. Second is that feels like to me we need a additional resource for right-of-way acquisition. That seems to be the bottleneck on a number of our projects. And so I don't know whether, that's something the city's already thinking about or not, to try to get some of these things going faster, but along with additional resource for whatever it was we're asking for, I think add right-of-way acquisition to that.
Okay.
This is Ed. I want to revisit the fare-free transit. I'm a big proponent of continuing the fare-free transit, and from the perspective of riding the paratransit, Go Durham Access, which is also free now. When fares are being levied for riding transit, typically paratransit riders are required to pay with exact change when they board the bus. The fares are higher than the fixed route buses. So that the impact on ridership on having fare-free paratransit, at least, I think, has really encouraged people to get out more. People who might otherwise be discouraged from getting out because of other issues with deficiencies with the paratransit system. So I'm hoping that paratransit and fixed route bus service can remain fare free. I think it's just a shining star for the city, generally speaking, to have that type of setup here. But the impact of imposing fares again on paratransit riders in particular could result in some significant downturn in ridership. So there's that.
I do remember maybe a couple of years ago when Kai Monast was still on this committee, he gave us a presentation about fares, transit fares and basically utilization as a function of the level at which the fares are set. And it argues pretty convincingly that the optimal fare in most situations is zero, if not negative, because having increased ridership in many ways pays for itself. So I think there's a pretty solid argument to be made on a lot of fronts there. Anybody else have any comment around that?
Yeah, one last thing, Brian, just
Sure.
for what it's worth on that, I just pulled up Sean's email. So it sounds like technically what he's saying is that in previous years, Manager Page determined that the fare free is not technically a budget request, since it's not really an expense, but rather it's foregone revenue. So so I need to find out more about what that means for the, but it may, just to know that language, that's might be helpful.
Okay. So maybe, okay, yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
And maybe, it may not, so it may not be strictly like a budget request, but it may live somewhere else. I'll find out more.
Okay.
But again, I think it's good that BPAC is like raising this one.
Yep. Okay. Anything else on fare free or anything else we may have missed on this list? I do have one follow-up on Scott's comment. Right. We talked briefly about the two-way cycle track. I think we talked about it in DevRev. And the other angle we thought about was we could also potentially fold that into the design detail ask. Like if we were going to ask for that, we would probably need there to be design details for that, which I strongly suspect do not exist currently in Durham, since I don't believe any two-way cycle tracks exist in Durham. Yeah, everybody's shaking their head. Okay. So we could fold that into one or both of those asks in addition to the one for enhanced bike lane protection. I'll add a note on that. Anything else? Does everybody feel generally good? So what I'm hearing is we've got support for basically all 7 that I've highlighted, plus potentially something about fare free if fare free needs to be a budget request, which would bring us to 8. So that's where we're at. I still think that's a reasonable number. I think we've done a pretty good job of prioritizing, even though that does mean we're leaving some probably worthwhile ideas on the table. We do want to focus a little bit. So I think what I can do, I don't think we ought to be voting yet, but what I can do is neaten up the working document, or maybe even generate a first draft of a bullet point letter that captures these. And then some of us, Tony, Carl, will probably have more information in the next month, and we can also look at the city's, the department's asks and see if we need to harmonize language on any of them. But I think our goal was to have something votable on by the January meeting, or at least a very, very good skeleton that we could probably vote on. And I'm happy to push that forward. I've actually got time to work on this coming up from Monday. So I'm happy to take that and then hand it over to Mary Rose to get it over the finish line. Does that sound good to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for playing ball on this. We, as most of you know, or maybe not, since so many joined in the summer, we were a little late with this last year, and I really wanted to avoid that scenario this year. So thanks for participating, and thanks for the committees for taking time out of their normal agenda to discuss this. I really appreciate it. Moving on. Let's see, we're at new business. And we've got a couple of things to talk about tonight. One we've already alluded to. The other is what came up in public comment last month with the encampments near the ATT in Fayetteville. Landon, I'm going to turn it over to you for this.
Yeah, so first off, I want to apologize. I was going to attempt to have a letter written that I could have submitted, but I'm going to try and work on that between now and January. However, I do have updates both from the community and a kind of an update on what was presented last time. So if you remember some of the public comments last time from and just for the new folks, I actually live near this area, in the particular area that we're talking about on the American Tobacco Trail. relates to the intersection with Fayetteville Street. So it's about 2 miles south of downtown, near it's also adjacent to a very particularly busy north-south bus station on the number 5 and I believe 12 lines. And there's a Food Lion and several convenience stores that do not sell gas stations, barbershops, and a Food Lion that's right there. And it's been a problematic area for many, for a good long while. If you go through the historic archives of the Wayback Wind Machine, it seems like as early as 2002, Durham was figuring out what to do with this particular area. There are even fully built out plans for parks that the city of Durham has attempted to that thought about building in that particular area around the American Tobacco Trail. I believe they had proposed that in 2006, and then with the financial crisis, that project was summarily nixed. So this has been an area that's been kind of neglected. And in our previous meeting, we had people come and express their frustrations. Some of my neighbors were members of those. There were drive-by shootings. There's been at least 3 murders there since December of 2019. And at that point, there was a homeless encampment built directly adjacent to the trail where there were multiple big bonfires there, several tent encampments, grills, people defecating and urinating around, and just general trash being thrown everywhere, to the point where it had attracted rodents. And one person who was formerly a member of the Durham Open Spaces and Trails Commission was 1 car behind a drive-by involving someone in said encampment and traffic passing on Fayetteville Street in broad daylight. Essentially, that part of the trail had become unusable. Since then, since they had voiced their frustrations, I know one of the things that people had talked about was that that encampment had burned down since the issue was first raised 2 months ago. Then it was rebuilt, and I actually just got back from a trip out of town last night. When I left last Monday, that encampment had been totally rebuilt and was bigger. When I arrived yesterday, I found that it was not there. And in speaking with some of the people who had made public comments, they had mentioned that it was even worse than before because the same encampment had burnt down again. There's an encampment with bonfires that has caught on fire twice in this area. And per this afternoon, there's new tents. What do we think is going to happen in a week? So I wasn't here. I don't know if someone has died from this, but something's going to happen here. And I don't know if writing a letter is what's going to do it here, but the update for me is that the recently rebuilt encampment has burnt down again and is in the process of being rebuilt. And per the comments from Tanya, who had come to speak to our meeting last time, there was a man who was as part of this newly rebuilt encampment who was urinating on the tobacco trail as she was walking up it today. I apologize for not having my letter written because I was out of the country all last week. So I promise I will have something working that I can present in January that can hopefully go to City Council. But I will reemphasize if this was happening on any other part of the American Tobacco Trail, the other neighborhoods and communities and law enforcement and everyone else in Durham would not tolerate it. And if it were happening on the southern end of the tobacco trail in our county, I wouldn't be surprised if the city of Cary or Raleigh got in touch with Durham to intervene because their constituents and their members of their community use that part of the trail. someone's gonna burn themselves to death, someone's gonna get shot, or there's gonna be a spread of disease. Something's got to happen here. I don't know if I know that we're an advisory commission, but yeah, it's to come back from being abroad and seeing that as like the first message back from my neighbors is really disheartening. I don't want to be the person to start calling the police on the unhoused.
Right.
I don't want to be that person. But when you've got neighbors getting shot at, and when the crown jewel of the Durham Parks and Rec Department and the open spaces and greenways part of this city, the one most effective north-south corridor for everyone who is not in a motor vehicle, becomes borderline unusable because there is a de facto autonomous zone that has been established and or abandoned by the city of Durham. I don't know what else to do. And my neighbors don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
So it's not a formal presentation. It's a cry for help.
Yeah.
But I am happy to, again, I apologize. I've been out of town. So I will attempt to better and put together some sort of letter. But also, like, if this continues to happen, like, I also fear that the language in which I will write this letter probably will not be the most empathetic and or kind. And I know that is something that we want to do and be as a committee. So when and if I do write it and present it, please feel free to tell me to rewrite it. But I will communicate as best I can the frustrations of the people in my community with the situation that is as it is and continues to be.
We have sent a strongly worded letter to for there's precedent. I do think your point about if it were happening anywhere else, it would have already been taken care of is certainly one that needs to be made in writing. And I will certainly support that aspect of it. I want to open the floor to people who've got their hands raised. So I'm going to go Mary Rose, Chris, and then John, and then we'll go from there. Mary Rose, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna add that there's two sides of the thing that I was about to say. But they're also illegally burning at the state level. So they are because of the materials that they are burning, they are breaking state laws. So the two sides being that, like, you could include that information in the letter that you're drafting, that they are breaking state laws, and therefore, like, if the city doesn't do anything about it, they are allowing this to continue. But the second side being that you or we could also report it to the Division of Air Quality that handles it. And then they would have to reach out to the city. So, like, we could have the state reach out to the city and be like, hey, people are illegally burning in your
That would be a
city
unique ask
on
for
a
this
property
committee.
that you
Normally
own.
it's the other way around. We want the state to get out of the way.
Right. Well, it's not DOT, it's Division of Air Quality. So it's a little different.
Sure.
They're nicer. I know them. So yeah, I mean, maybe that could be a second option, or I mean, it could be done simultaneously. I mean, I can submit the report tomorrow. It's just like I call the office and tell them about it. And then the city would get a nasty gram from the state.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Chris, go ahead, and then we'll go to John.
Yeah, I guess start off with, I think this is all ends up being that issue of, where you spend this money, and the money that we could spend. I know it's not like 100% solution, but on providing housing, no matter how small or different than what most of us live in, can provide a better alternative, and not doing these things has these knock-on effects like this, right? I also want to reiterate how bad that area is, because I don't live in this area like Landon does, but I travel through there regularly. I think I've talked about this multiple times. That's a major corridor for me to get to many things south of here. And like Landon talked about, like, this is the golden jewel of pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure moving north-south. And it is my only route to get south to go see my mom in Cary by bike. It's my only route by bike to get to South Point Mall. It's my only route to go see friends that I have that live in that area, right? And not that my shopping experiences or whatever are more important than getting people housed, but imagine the reaction as a community, generally not to anybody here, but if somebody started an encampment on 147, how long would that last? I understand that a lot of these folks that are doing this are acting out of desperation. So this isn't really necessarily like putting the blame on them, but at some point, right, when you have these kinds of impacts to the community at large, there has to be a point where you draw a line and say, like, whatever we're going to do, we got to do something. I don't know what that is. It's a complicated issue. I know that. I don't have an answer, but I've been on here, and one thing that I don't think Landon talked about, there's been a couple of times where somebody's had an off-leash dog, and it's somebody who is unhoused, and I've been in with my cargo bike. I've got my dog in there, right? And what happens if they don't have control of an off-leash dog and I get attacked, right? Is that the same as drive-by shooting? Absolutely not. But that is still an issue of health and safety, and I think those kinds of things have these broad impacts on our ability to use this infrastructure. And I think it also, spoiler alert, is going to tie into some of the stuff I'm going to talk about with the schools and abilities to leverage this infrastructure as a safe way to get to school. So that's my spiel.
Thanks, Chris. John, you had your hand up earlier. Do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I guess the two thoughts. One, when I've gone through that neighborhood or gone through the intersection, immediately my guard has always gone up. I've lived and worked in inner cities and Fort Worth and Dallas, and so you recognize the signs immediately that there risk there. But when I've gone through there up until recently, there were never any encampments. Okay, so the problem is more complicated than just the folks trying to live there. Okay, it's the people hanging out around there from the intersection, from the neighborhood. Okay, and so it's out of work folks who are not homeless, but they're hanging out there because they're allowed to. Okay, and they're sitting right beside two convenience stores where they can buy cigarettes and beer and add to that hanging out experience. And so the homeless issue is, could be the neighborhood taking out the issue of now here's another problem, with strangers coming by and camping on, at the entrance to this, because they're going to perceive that most of the users of the trail are not from the neighborhood anyway, but they don't perceive most of them as a threat because they're just passing through, and that's the difference. So one thought is that one. It's not just the homeless situation. It's more involved than that. The second one is, this is complicated. Whatever the solution is going to be, is it enough that we propose it as a problem to be solved, or is it something that we should get together and come to some recommendations on as to what we would like to see? So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks. Your latter point is something I'm wrestling with still. I agree. I think we all agree that there's problems. I think we do struggle for clear suggestions and solutions, but we should probably try. I see Tony, Christian, Andres, Landon. So we'll take you in that order. So Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is, as some of you know, I was pretty involved in the early planning of the American Tobacco Trail, and this type of issue and this particular part of the trail was a long-standing planning concern. And so although I'm disheartened by what's happened, I wouldn't say it's completely unexpected. So I hope that going forward, we can be more prepared for these kind of issues. And, you know, we have the same kind of clash between users and communities in the eastern part of the Durham Rail Trail and the first 4 to 6 miles of the planned Roxborough Trail. So I really hope we can get a handle on this. That would be one point. Another point is my wife and I were talking about this morning in the broader sense. We had recent bond issues in the Parks and Rec and sidewalks area, but what about affordable housing, right? One of the root causes here is a lack of affordable housing for folks. And then finally, we lease this trail from the state. The state normally is pretty aggressive about removing encampments. I wonder if we could look at, if it would be appropriate to look at who the actual landowner of the land where the encampment is and work with them to try to reach a solution. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Andres, you had your hand up earlier. Did you?
I did. I took it down because you acknowledged that I was that you had called on me. So
Okay. Okay. Go
Yeah,
go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah.
Floor is yours. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. And yeah, I really appreciate everyone bringing this up. Land and I appreciate not just bringing this to our attention, but really delivering an impassioned summary of what the conditions are in that part of our community. I, like Chris and others, use that trail frequently. I actually use it whenever I commute to work by bike, which is fairly often, probably a couple times a month. I do that by bike. And I have observed the encampments there and have kind of like John mentioned, kept to myself when I'm there as to not draw attention or anything like that. I'm very fortunate that I can do that, for all intents and purposes, when people see me walking down the street, I'm a white dude, a young, pretty in shape white dude. And so I think it's important when we're talking, because when it comes to that encampment, there's a very blatant racial, socioeconomic difference between this body and those that are in the encampment. I guess the one worry that I would have that I haven't heard brought up, I appreciate Mary Rose bringing up the Division of Air Quality. I'm not very familiar with them as an agency or their processes or whatever. My worry is, however the city would address this issue, whichever way the state addresses it would be more aggressive. It would be one in that I would argue, just based on the attitude of the city of Durham, and anyone's welcome to disagree with me here. I would imagine that the state is, if it's anything like the state DOT, would be a lot less forgiving in tearing an encampment down and not doing anything else to address it. Just hands off, we did our part. And if they were to respond with such a carceral response, be it tearing it down and getting some sort of law enforcement involved, it could have negative implications on those that are living there who, yes, they are breaking the law, but they're still people just like you and I. And they don't need time in a jail cell. They need resources, they need mental health support, they need all sorts of things that we can't imagine. My worry would be that a carceral response, which would be more likely from state entities than it would the city, and that's just a personal perception. Feel free to say I'm wrong there. It wouldn't address the root problems. It would, we'd get to pat ourselves on the back and say, hey, we cleaned the trail. It's nice and pretty now. Or even if that's not the case, those people are going to go somewhere else. And given that they don't have access to a car, and they're already used to, I'm seeing Aspen's message here. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me too. If the city has a decently carceral response, which I personally would be opposed to such a harsh response. I don't know what the answer is, but there's been a lot of news coming out of California and places like that about taking down encampments. And it's been I'm not going to get into all of that. That's too national for this conversation. Yeah, my worry would be that a response that is too carceral and too focused on, oh, there's a dirty encampment on the trail, which there is, but there's multiple facets to it, would simply drive those folks somewhere else, almost certainly on the American Tobacco Trail. And so the TLDR of this is way bigger than us. But we have a role in protecting those who utilize that trail for everyday transportation. Some who, again, look like me and can go past that, past there and not face any sort of harassment or anything. But then those that don't and could face harassment or worse. Chris mentioned his dog possibly getting attacked by another dog in the encampment or whatever. Those are valid concerns. And so I appreciate everyone giving this not only the attention it deserves, but the care it deserves in discussing it and acknowledging that these are human beings that are living in this encampment. It's not like an infestation or anything like that. These are people, and that the situation needs to be addressed as such.
Thank you for that.
Christian, sorry, just to add on, like these people are pedestrians at that. So there's that part of it too.
Yep. Okay. Thank you for that perspective. I think it's really important. Christian, I have you next, and everybody's got your hands up. Please just keep your hand up so I can keep track of you. Christian, go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just gonna say that I do agree, and I'm glad that this issue is being brought up. So I do agree with like writing a letter and stuff, because it is a pretty dangerous little area. I actually do have a personal experience coming back from South Point going towards downtown. You know, somebody came out of the woods and tried to tackle me. Fortunately, they missed. But that kind of also ties in with what John was saying, that it's not just homeless people. Like the guy that jumped out from the woods. I don't know if he was just trying to take my backpack or something. He was a young guy. He looked, he had some nice shoes and nice clothes and whatnot. So I don't think he was homeless. I could be wrong, right? But I've seen that a lot. A lot of kids, a lot of people that not necessarily they look homeless, but they're just there, hanging out, doing whatever they do, I guess. So the issue is more than just finding housing or something for these homeless people. It's also people, how can we deter the crime, I guess you can say. But I was just curious, has the city ever put a plan in place for this area, or have they always been like, you know what, let's just ignore it, it doesn't really affect us or whatever. So I was just curious if there's ever been any type of plan or something from the city.
Well, Uh, Tony, do you have an answer to that? The way your hand just went up, I'm just curious.
Oh, no, I was just
Okay.
going to say with the Roxborough Rail Trail, the Durham Rail Trail, and the American Tobacco Trail, this is going to be a corridor that's longer than the Washington Old Dominion Trail
Yeah.
in Washington. And I wonder if it's time to have a park authority that um, has officers to actually police the trail.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Well, Christian, we'll come back to that question, I think, but I suspect the answer for the question that I think you're asking is no. But if somebody can tell us otherwise as we go through, please do so. Landon, I have you next, Mary Rose, and then Carl.
There is zero law enforcement presence in this area and in my experience, I think I had biked over 4,000 miles last year. Now I'm going to brag on my Strava stats to you. I think 3,000 miles the year before that. I'm a lot less on that now, but a lot of that's done on the tobacco trail. I've seen not one police officer.
Yeah.
And the only other time, to answer some other points for folks, unless there has been a murder or an assault, there has been zero police presence in that entire area near the tobacco trail. Not just what goes on the tobacco trail, but all of the latent nonsense that has been alluded to by Christian, by non-unhoused individuals in and around those businesses down there near that intersection, which is probably, if I had to guess and divinate, where the source of the drive-by shootings have been. It's not, I understand compassion. There needs to be compassion for the people who are trying to make it through the winter. But there's also people who live in this neighborhood who are not in this encampment, and they're getting shot at. And I understand that the solutions may be complicated, but I would say I would ask how patient you would be if this was happening next to you. And another and quite frankly, the question, I get the hesitation for a more, and this is why I'm probably, my letter might be a bit controversial next time. I think one of the questions that needs to be answered is it okay that this area, not just the tobacco trail, but that general area where a lot of this is happening, is it okay if this is to become an autonomous zone where everything goes and nothing is done and no carceral responses or no law enforcement is to be present? Does that need to be communicated to the people who live in and around here? Because that would not fly in any other part of the city. That's my piece.
Okay, thank you. Mary.
I was just gonna clarify some points primarily that Andres brought up. So looking at the aerial view, depending on how far they've sort of like spread, it's either exclusively in the right of way of the trail or it's sort of breaking into individuals' lots. So like there's some of the businesses, but also I've seen it spread farther south down the trail, and it could potentially be in the property of Durham Public Schools because of the school that's right there.
It is.
So in terms of like what DAQ would do is they would write letters to all of the landowners. And it would kind of be like, it's your responsibility. But I think because of the right of way, maps.durham and c.gov doesn't tell me who owns the right of way exclusively. But it would go to the owner of the right of way. So probably the city, and if the city is leasing it from the state, then also the state. So, and if nothing is done, then more letters will be sent out and enforcement would be done. But DAQ's enforcement is, we are going to fine you. So either all of these individual owners, but primarily the city, would get fined by the state indefinitely until it is solved.
Right.
If they're burning still. If they're not burning, the DAQ can't do anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks. Councilmember Rist, and then John, I see your hand up, and we'll go to you after that. So Carl, go ahead.
Yeah, man, this is like, it's a tricky issue. I just want to say, first of all, I want to thank all the folks who shared about their experience there. I totally hear, and I'm sorry for the experience there of sort of uncomfortability of like shootings, all this stuff that's happened. I really apologize for that. I also appreciate comments from other folks. You know, like in Durham, we don't tend to want to criminalize homelessness. So I understand the other folks who talked about the need to have compassion for folks who, in many cases, have nowhere to live otherwise. So this is as you probably know, this is kind of a hot button issue, not just in that corner there, but like certainly downtown right now with encampments downtown or near downtown. So it's a hot topic for the city council, county commissioners, staff. And so there's a lot of conversations in motion now for addressing some of these concerns long-term, starting with the budget next year, but also in the short term right now, given the challenge we have, increased homeless populations, unhoused populations, concerns about safety downtown. It's all part of the same sort of thing that we're dealing with right now, including a lack of affordable housing. So I just wanted to lay back and let you all talk about this. I'm just your liaison to this commission. I think ultimately you all have to decide what you want to do about this and how do you want to respond. I would say from my take on this conversation, my advice would be that I think what's happening there at the trail in Fayetteville, you know, it's a tricky thing because it falls between police, HART, community development, DPR, which is actually nominally responsible for like, you know, managing trails. So it falls between those agencies. I did get an email back from Wade Walcott, who manages DPR. I shared with a couple of folks, Brian and Mary Rose and Nathan. They may share it with the rest of the commission, but they're aware of this. It's largely an enforcement issue. So when things happen, when people call the police or call HART, they kick into action. They go out there and tell people they can't stay there. There's a time they let them move their stuff. If not, there's as you've described, Lynn, this is kind of a cyclical thing where they're there for a while, they get cleared out, and come back. So, you know, I think if the police chief were here, she would say like call 911 if you see something or if you have concerns, because it seems like less of a policy issue, more really an enforcement thing. But on the other hand, I think what Tony raised about like we're building more and more of these trails. We don't really have staff or sort of trail police, and so I think there's a larger policy issue that BPAC may want to weigh in as well about whether we need additional resources on either the HART team or somewhere in public safety to provide some ongoing security and oversight on trails. So it's definitely a tricky thing. But I'm glad we brought this up, and I support you all in whatever you all want to decide, and I'm happy to help bring that forward once you all decide.
Thank you for that perspective. We'll go to John and then Scott, and then I'm hoping we can maybe wrap this up for this month soon, but if you got anything else, throw your hands up. But John, then Scott.
So the discussion's been really interesting. But one of the things that I think we have to remember is, what is our mission? Our mission is to find a way to promote safer and more active pedestrian activity and cycling activity. And this is the key trail in Durham. This is the key corridor in Durham. And if you want action, you've got to be the squeaky wheel. And I think we need to take a hard line that says we need it cleaned up. Okay? It's not our issue as to where everybody goes. I can be sympathetic there, But I think we have a mission to say, our job is to promote safer pedestrian activity, and this is the key place. Safer cycling along this corridor, and this is the key corridor. And we need to make sure it's clear and it's taken care of. And I think our mission needs to be one of saying, with focus, we need that situation to change. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Scott and Tony.
Yep. So I look at this from historically from a litter pickup standpoint, and I think it's because nothing was ever done, it's gotten worse and kind of out of hand. But I think a first step would be make it less convenient for people to hang out there. And that could be done by extending the fences so that people don't have such an easy path to get from the woods or the parking lot or whatever onto the trail or across the trail. And, I think that would make a pretty big difference in making it unfriendly for people to kind of loiter and hang out there. And, it would lower the threat and the intimidation and the sort of scariness part of it. I mean, it's not going to fix, if it is homeless people, it's not going to fix any of that, obviously. But I just feel like let's just take the first steps, and I think that would make a difference.
And what I was going to say is just, I agree completely with John. I mean, our mission is we're not the Durham Housing Authority, right? If people don't feel safe in using this trail for pedestrian and bicycle non-automotive transportation, then that is a huge blow to the prime corridor for that, which is going to be building and increasing as we develop the Durham and Roxborough rail trails. So I think we need to insist on enforcement to allow users to safely use this trail and not feel threatened if they are bicycling or walking on this trail. And I mean, as someone said earlier, I've always sensed that this was a potential problem area, but now we have a really active situation, and it's really going to affect our non-automotive transportation corridors in Durham if we don't clean this up. And let's leave these other issues to those who are appointed to take care of them.
Okay, thank you for that. I think, Landon, you've got a task ahead of you that I think you'll have many hands to help you with, because we have had, I think, a really good conversation here. And I do want to thank everybody. This is not an easy topic. So thank you all for making your points and keeping this constructive and civil. I think we will probably need to do it a little more before we collectively come up with an answer. So thank you for that, and please keep it up. What I might suggest, Landon, is once you've got enough of a draft is he still here? Did we lose Landon?
No, this is Trevay.
He had to join on his phone, so I just
okay, got it. I'll just quickly recap. Landon, I was just saying, I think the actions with you to take a first stab at a letter. I would suggest once you've got enough of it done, you feel okay with doing so.
Yeah.
Put the draft up on the Google Drive in the workspace and let everybody know so we can see it, and maybe comment as we go.
Cool.
There's a lot of good points that have been made tonight, and there's, I think, at least 3 that probably need to be captured really well.
Yep. Yeah, totally. And then sorry, for some reason my computer just decided to restart. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah. If I can make one last point on this, I am still also more than willing to host a site visit. But I would, for folks who will be contributing to the letter, and I appreciate the discussion and all points. But on this site visit, a couple things. I'm happy to have people meet at my house and go down to the site, or we can meet at downtown and ride through it. However, I don't know if anyone on this council or sitting here in this meeting would be comfortable actually getting off their bike and walking around there, or locking up your bike there in that part of the trail and getting out and walking around. And that in itself is a damning indictment of how bad it's gotten down there. So I will also in this letter, I'll set out or I'll make points of some times that I'm happy to go down there, maybe on like a weekend evening. That's another thing, is that like, I know a lot of people here bike also at night. I don't know if anyone would be comfortable biking through that area at night.
I go very fast.
I've got a question. This is Trevay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm new to the Durham area. I've been here long, but how often does Durham police do patrols? Do they do night patrols through there, or
Zero.
is it just daytime hours? Zero.
Not even during the day.
Wow. See, Raleigh does. That's the thing that's different. I've seen Raleigh do patrols, but that's why I asked if Durham does them, because if Durham did them, we wouldn't have these problems or to this extreme.
Shouldn't Durham police have a bike task force or something? I used to do EMS in Guilford County and Greensboro, and EMS had their own, bicycle team, and they'll pair up with Greensboro PD and stuff. So I assume with the size of Durham, they should have like a bike.
Yeah, I
force
put
or
that
something.
actually in the chat. And so I think it was before COVID time, they did have a small police group that would patrol some of the American Tobacco Trail. My understanding, they kind of stopped at Enterprise Street and then kind of just did like downtown, like that strip. And then with the COVID and just like worker shortage and everything, that kind of fizzled away. But I did talk to a police officer a few months ago, and he said that they were starting to train people again, because a lot of the people that were previously trained were no longer on the force. So it seems like they are wanting to kind of start that again. I don't know if they have the resources to do it on the trail, but I think having them in this conversation could be really helpful, and bringing this to their attention. Maybe it could just be once a day, twice a day or something, an officer bikes down it, or something like that. I think that could go a long way.
It's also part of the large number of vacancies right now in the police department. So part of how we are seeking to address that is through the massive wage increases we did last year in the budget. So the police department is beginning to get folks to come to the academy, trying to fill the slots. It's going to take a while to fill some of those unfilled slots, but that's the goal long term of the department. And I think once there's more folks on the police force, I think they could potentially, and I know I've talked to the chief about this, I think they could consider some of those bike patrols in the future, but it's right now just a shortage of officers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think we'll be working on this for a little bit. Thank you again, everybody, for the discussion. I thought it was really positive. I think I'd like to move on to the next item, which was an update on DPS and crosswalks and related topics. Chris, are you ready to talk about that?
And I'd also
Yeah.
like to note, so Kristen Brookshire with Durham Public Schools, she joined just to kind of listen in to make sure that, nothing inaccurate was being talked about, and just to answer any questions. So I don't know if she's able to talk this whole time, but just wanted to let you know she's on the line. So
Thanks. Welcome, Kristen. Thank you for being here. Chris, go ahead, please.
Yeah, that's actually great. One of the struggles I had navigating the DPS website is kind of identifying where we're at in the process. So I think there's either like stuff that's still in motion being figured out, maybe, possibly, or I'm just not aware of what the actual policy is going to be and some of the details. That was one of the things that I was going to try to work on, but didn't make as much progress. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I got a little bit of a slideshowy thing that I'm working on. So my goal was to kind of look at So I think there was like 21 schools is what I saw in a press release. We're gonna have like the walk zones more enforced, or I think they also use the term family responsibility zone. So it's not just, you know, oh, you have to walk. It's like, oh, you know, there's other things you can do, but it's gonna be kind of on families to figure out. But what I wanted to do is kind of look at these areas and kind of draw a circle around them, see like how much of the zone is maybe technically within a 1 mile or 1.5 mile radius, and what the infrastructure sort of looks like to facilitate that. And so I was going to try to do this for multiple schools. This is a lot more work than I realized. So I actually just did a deep dive on one school. And so hopefully that works out well. And I think this is a good opportunity to maybe like discuss this. And if others want to get involved, it kind of gives a little bit of a template. I want to call out John Lawler specifically. He emailed me a couple of times about this and I failed to follow up. So apologies for that. But he gave some great feedback on this. I also want to let Ed know I'm going to send you the PowerPoint presentation after I get some stuff spruced up. So there's some like text descriptions of images that I'm showing. That's kind of lacking currently. So I figured this wasn't going to be very useful to send out before the meeting. I'd also like to say to our new member, Rosie, that it would be great to get some of your perspective as a student on kind of the things that you feel like you need to facilitate this, or kind of your views on this. So anyway, with that, I will get going. Hopefully you guys can see my screen. I'm working on a very small screen. So let me, can everybody see this? Okay, great. So the school I chose to look at is C.C. Spalding. It's kind of an interesting school for a few different reasons that we'll get into. But like I said, there's this like walk zone or family responsibility zone concept. Not really sure where we're at. I think the last thing that I had read was this was going to be implemented sometime in I believe it was January, I guess, when school starts again, possibly. And I think there's a lot of different like parts of this. I see Kristen's got her hand up. So, you know, if you've got some more information on what's happening,
good
let me
evening,
know.
everyone. Yeah, you're not wrong in not being able to find more information online. I'll just say briefly that it first came to the board on November 7th, and it's again in front of the board this Thursday. So nothing's been decided yet. They're considering a few different strategies that are projected to alleviate, you know, bus service impacts due to the ongoing driver shortage. And Durham currently doesn't implement any version of a walk zone or family responsibility zone. So this would be a first, not an expansion of existing zones. People are familiar with no transport zones in Wake County and walk zones in Chapel Hill, Carborough, and of course other counties. So I'll just say that Thursday is before the board again. So
And are those public? And is that something that
no, it's not. Yeah,
Okay.
it's not yet public. Well, I don't want to, I'll let you go through. I didn't mean to chime in so quickly. I just wanted everybody to know that nothing had been decided yet and that it's on the board agenda this Thursday. It was narrowed down that 21 elementary schools could potentially have a family responsibility zone. But the list of those schools or the bounds of those proposed zones have not been shared yet.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
That's nice to confirm, because sometimes it's like you're not really
No,
sure.
you didn't miss anything. I know it's
It's tough. I
No,
get it. C.C. Spalding, it's named after Charles Clinton Spalding, business leader known for presiding. He was the president of the North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company for an extended period of time, very long. I think it was like 30 years or something like that. He actually passed away in Durham, though he was born somewhere else in North Carolina, I think further south. The school has an enrollment of 225 to 230 students. Not sure exactly what the number is. Kind of found those two different things. So it's a smaller school. It's also 99% economically disadvantaged. I tried to correlate this to data that Durham has published in the past about like car-free households, and it's kind of hard to really like suss out those numbers, but I assume there's going to be a lot of like correlation to that kind of metric, right? So I think this represents an interesting school to look at, and sort of the consequences that these communities are going to have to deal with. So I use the Durham maps, or maps.durhamnc.gov, if I remember right. It's some GIS stuff it's really great to play with. You can activate a lot of different layers. So here I've got a map in the center of this circle that you see, this whiter circle. That is where CC Spalding is. And this circle is a 1 mile radius. I picked 1 mile because I wasn't sure how these policies are going to be defined in terms of walk zones. Like, is it a 1 mile walk for the student or a 1.5 mile walk for the student? Or is the zone that's like the walk zone considered by like as the crow flies kind of thing? And I'm sure there's aspects that consider the state of infrastructure as well. But what I decided to do is just start with a 1 mile zone. And what you can tell from this is that this area kind of bounded by this shape here is the zone for CC Spalding. And so the vast majority of this school's zone is inside the walk zone, right? Almost all of it except for this area that's called Rockwood here off to the southwest. And then there's a little sliver that we'll talk about as well down here. So assuming there's no other aspect to the policy, this would mean that essentially the entire school is in the walk zone or family responsibility zone. But what you can also see from this map is I've got trails and sidewalks turned on, as well as Go Durham bus routes. There's also a bicycle layer for this if you go play around with this on your own. But once I added that, it was a little bit too much visual noise. So I didn't put the bicycle infrastructure on there. There's not enough for it to be a big deal. We'll talk about like what's there. Kristen, go ahead.
Thank you. Just to clarify, the existing board policy mimics what the state of North Carolina says in that an LEA, school board or school district that provides school bus transportation must provide it for students who live 1.5 miles from their school. And then just like most other districts, we have a vague provision that says where hazardous walking conditions exist, the superintendent or the BOE or someone else may provide service within that area. So this is, I'll just recap briefly what we've shared in some of the previous board meetings is that we started our analysis looking at 1.5 miles from the schools and worked our way in based on 3 criteria, infrastructure criteria, and we ended up where nothing extended beyond a mile anyway, and most are less than a mile in any direction, bounded by the proposed criteria of it's okay to walk along and across 25-mile-an-hour residential streets, no walking along or across high volume streets without sidewalks, and no crossing of 35-mile-an-hour and above streets without a traffic signal, crosswalk beacon, and or crossing guard. So those are, I can put those in the chat too, but those have been in board slides as well.
That would be fantastic if you could do that.
Sure.
Really, and one question for you, just point of clarification, is that 1 mile or whenever there's like a radius like that, that's a 1 mile or 1.5 mile, is that as the crow flies kind of thing, or is that based on kind of an estimate?
It is as the crow flies. It's not a network analysis.
Perfect. Awesome. So that kind of gives us a reference point here. You can see how, like, if we were implementing this with 1.5 miles, the entire zone would be included. There's some interesting opportunities that you see from this. You can tell that the sidewalk network is actually quite good up here to the north part of the zone, and does connect well to the school. It kind of starts to fall apart here, but we can talk a little bit about that. And maybe there's some aspects of the policy that would change this, but the overall thing here is that there's actually quite a bit of bus opportunities with the city buses. The number 7 actually goes inbound to downtown here along the middle on South Roxborough Street, cuts right through the middle of the zone, stops at the school, and then continues north and goes east here on, I think this is Enterprise. So that you can see the bus stops here if you look really closely, and then continues up north to downtown. Coming south, it also drops off right here at the school. But the little twist is that as it's going out from downtown, it actually goes down Lawson and comes through this part of the district. So if you're somebody who's going to try to use that as an option to get to school, you kind of have a little bit of a walk one way or another, even if you live like right at the bus stop here, because there's that difference in terms of the inbound and outbound. The number 8 Route number 8 goes along South Roxborough and Lawson. Okay, so I think there's another one that goes, yeah, the number 8 comes through here and goes down Lawson and then goes through North Carolina Central. So that's another option. Kind of provides increased frequency, especially for those folks further north. So, you know, you've got 2 different routes that are serving right through here and stop right at the school. Another interesting thing is that the 12 goes along Fayetteville Street here. So that could be like an option to reduce the amount of walking that has to happen. But, you know, we're talking about the Fayetteville Street corridor. And I think like most folks are going to be pretty uncomfortable with their kids on that, even via bus. It's pretty intense corridor. And there's that policy about crossing. And I think that's nominally a 35-mile-an-hour street, but there's a lot of missing crosswalks. I'm not sure how much that's signalized. The other really interesting point is that the American Tobacco Trail cuts right through this and is pretty close to where the school is, but there's some consequences to some of the design choices that we made that actually make it interestingly not useful, which again, I'll get into the details there. So here is a Google Maps route that's from that southern point that's just outside of that 1 mile radius, showing that it is technically a 1.5 mile walk. It's actually 1.3 miles. So that would be included in that radius, and it would be under a 1.5 mile walk for students that are right near that apartment complex where the Food Lion is. The part that's interesting here is that a lot of this does not have sidewalks. So here you have sidewalks along Roxborough, but in this area, these are all neighborhood streets that don't have sidewalks. And I'm just kind of curious what the policy ends up being, you know, is if it's a neighborhood street that's 25 miles an hour, or we put traffic calming, lower speed limits, can we facilitate children walking where we're probably never going to put sidewalks? And, you know, I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think that's an important consideration. Why the American Tobacco Trail ends up being a longer path. So if you notice, that's much longer. It's 1.6 miles instead of 1.3 miles. The reason is there's not a connection here from the American Tobacco Trail to Roxborough. So you have to continue up just near where Forest Hills is, and then come over here through this neighborhood and come back down. So it's kind of a little bit of a roundabout way. So I think that shows where like there's little places where you can improve the connection and potentially make this much more feasible for these students. This is from that I think it was Rockwood, if I remember right, neighborhood that's out at that southwest corner. This is pretty impractical, I think, and wouldn't be in line with anybody's policies, because what you notice here is that this neighborhood is isolated. You have to either use University Drive or you have to go on Cornwallis, and both of these do not have sidewalks. I believe University Drive is technically 35 miles per hour, but nobody is going to want to walk along that. It might even be 25 in some of these sections, but nobody's going to want to walk along that. Nobody's going to want their kids to walk along that. Same thing with Cornwallis. So I don't think that would really work. There is a trail connection here that isn't shown in Rockwood Park, I think, technically, and that's something that could be spruced up. Another thing that I kind of missed on the last slide, if I can go back, let me see. If I go back a slide. Unfortunately, I don't know how to do that, so we're just going to roll with it. But there's actually on that GIS map that shows future planned trails, though who knows when that's going to happen. There is a planned greenway that goes from Rockwood Park over here to Roxborough, and I think into this green space, if I remember right, or maybe even connects up somewhere over here. That would theoretically provide a lot of connections for this neighborhood to get through. But I think this is a pretty challenging area currently. So what can we do in this zone? You know, there's things where we can add pedestrian improvements. So marking all crosswalks. There's a lot of places, especially right around the school, where there are not marked crosswalks. I think it really only impacts a handful of students, but it allows more options for routing and maybe signals to drivers that, hey, you're in a school zone, you need to slow down. There's a bunch of these high-vis crossings. I think any primary street like South Roxborough, Cornwallis, Lawson, Fayetteville, we've got to just, you know, if we're going to have this policy get implemented, I think we've got to buckle down and find a way to paint all these crosswalks. It's pretty low-hanging fruit in my mind. I don't know all the details around it, especially when it's on an NCDOT street, but I think that's kind of a minimum action that should be taken, even if kids aren't walking. You know, I think that signals on those streets in those zones that like, this is an area that you've got to slow down more, right? Traffic calming on neighborhood streets, I think it's just a realistic part of the world we live in. We're not going to be channeling a bunch of our infrastructure dollars to put sidewalks on every single street, especially these developed streets that maybe don't have a lot of space. We don't have right of way. There's a bunch of drama here. But, you know, if we can get these neighborhood street speeds down with traffic calming, reduce cut through traffic, can that facilitate these kids being able to walk along these streets? Expanding the sidewalk network as much as possible. You know, these primary streets like Cornwallis and University Drive are significant barriers in this particular school zone. Cornwallis does have some sidewalks along it, but they end before that Rockwood neighborhood, which cuts them off completely from separated infrastructure for people to walk and get to that school. I talked about that connection from the American Tobacco Trail to South Roxborough. That would be huge for connectivity there. I don't know why we don't have that. I know there's probably some nuances with the grading there, and that being a previous like grade separated rail crossing probably creates some challenges, but that's a small project that feels like it could do a lot of good there. Adding neighborhood connections in general and increasing the permeability to the American Tobacco Trail can allow kids to not have to do like roundabout ways. And I could show like some of that on Google Maps, where like there's certain neighborhoods where, you know, it's technically feasible and it's less than 1.5 miles or less than a mile, but it could be half the distance if there was just these like little cut through areas. Obviously there's also like, this should be a huge, kick in the pants about us getting our greenway and multi-use path projects going. This facilitates a lot of things, and you know, gotta wonder what's the infrastructure cost benefit analysis versus paying a bunch of people to get bus to school who live, you know, less than 1 mile from school. And you know, I don't know what the answer to that is, but I'd be curious to see, you know, what the math is and whether that makes sense. Making this transition, obviously, if we're providing busing currently, I think this is gonna be something that we all gotta work through. So I think one of the things that we can do is obviously organize and facilitate crossing guards, especially at major intersections. Make sure this is as safe as possible during those prime hours where that's happening. And you know, I don't know how much of that's like community it can be community led, or if staff have the ability to deal with this. I don't want to ask more of our overloaded school staff, but you know, this is the world we're in. So how do we do this safely? Bicycle improvements. So, you know, I'm kind of curious what the culture is in this neighborhood. And I think that's a big aspect of, you know, are these folks that have bicycles would be open to biking? But if that is something that's worthwhile and something we can facilitate and would benefit the community, I think traffic calming on those same streets to facilitate lower stress riding with, you know, roundabouts, whatever it is, to reduce cut through traffic and keep those streets much calmer, where we're not going to ever be able to do a multi-use path or bike lane would be great. Same thing about the connection to the American Tobacco Trail. There are bike lanes on parts of South Roxborough Street. They do not extend all the way to the school, so that's kind of a dead end currently. So if we can expand that, that would be great. The other thing is adding physical protection. If you go look in Google Maps right now, you can actually look at the section that does have those bike lanes. There's cars parked in it. So obviously, if a child's going to be leaning on that, that infrastructure is completely worthless, right? It's just you can't count on a child being able to bike to that if there's no guarantee that that lane is going to be available. Like, what are they going to do? Turn around, come home? And especially as it currently stands, you know, the idea of just riding into the street, or you know, relying on children without like a bike bus and chaperones and stuff like that to make a good decision about like, oh well, I'll just drag my bike onto the sidewalk. It just gets too complicated. We have to decide whether we're facilitating this or not, whether we want this to be usable or not. Getting planned greenway projects, same thing. You know, we can add some of these connections and it greatly facilitates biking to schools. I couldn't see any bike racks at this school from Google Maps view, street views. I didn't visit the site or anything like that. Obviously, that's a pretty easy thing to do. If there's people who want to do this, you're going to have a place to lock up the bike. Having bike train education, we have some schools and where there's parents who are very active about organizing bike trains to get these kids to school, maybe providing educational materials and some training and like facilitation, and having other neighbors who have experience with this come and help. Could be a great option to get this into communities where, if they want it, you know, get them up and going with this with some folks that have experience with it, and provide those kinds of resources. There's also the question of like, when you've got a school that's 99% socioeconomically disadvantaged, are they going to have bikes, right? So is that a place where we got to rope in organizations like Bike Durham or the bike co-op to get some of that to these kids, so they have that as an option. There's also the transit improvement side of it. If you're going to leverage Go Durham buses, I think that's a great way to kind of continue expanding and investing in our bus system. One thing I wanted to look into and that I didn't get around to is, I'm not sure how many folks are aware of this, the yellow school bus dedicated thing is actually pretty unique to USA and maybe North America, I think. A lot of other countries don't do that. They actually use public transportation for this. I don't think we're really there yet, but it would be great to get there. So what are the kinds of things we would need to facilitate that? I think bus shelters with good weather protection at all stops within the zone would be important. Somebody's not going to want their kids standing out in, a thunderstorm waiting for the Go Durham bus, even if it's only for like 5-10 minutes. If we get our frequency up, you still want that weather protection. Marked high visibility crosswalks, not just near the school, but also near all those bus stops is going to be really important, because you got to get from that bus stop to your house. Providing additional frequency and capacity, right? This is a pretty small school, so I imagine this wouldn't be as much drama, but you can imagine how some of the other schools, if students were actually taking advantage of this, you could really end up needing some additional frequency during those arrival and dismissal times. Also, there's the thought of chaperones, right? Like, we all know that being a school bus driver is very different than being a city bus driver, both from the driver skill set, right? The Go Durham bus drivers, they're collecting fares. Well, in our case, they're not collecting fares currently, but collecting fares, managing adult passengers, driving a bunch of people to a bunch of different stops, right? That's very different from the school bus thing, where you're picking up people from a bunch of different places, but only dropping them off in one place. They're all in the same age range. You've got friends, maybe they fight, you got enemies, whatever. Lots of drama there. So, kind of what are the things we need to facilitate that? I kind of threw out there chaperones, maybe, especially initially, to kind of get that figured out. I don't really know. But I imagine that that's going to be something that we'll have to work through too, as it's a big change. So I think that's all I had. Follow-up tasks. So one thing I wanted to do that I didn't get around to is reach out to public school system and get details on the policies, which I now got a little bit more info. Thank you, Kristen. Reach out to the principal of schools, right? So I'd like to reach out to this principal and find out, hey, what is your perspective on the community's challenges, needs, desires? And then also get engagement from parents in the community somehow. I don't know what that would be, like community meeting at the school. I don't know. But find out what the community wants, right? Maybe this is a community that doesn't want to bike, but they're open to taking the bus. Maybe they want to walk. Maybe they don't. I don't know. I do want to kind of throw out, there's a bunch of little other details we can talk about with this stuff, like little specific problem areas. There's also the idea that, like, I don't know if you noticed with that zone, one of the things that students would potentially have to use in some of those areas is the American Tobacco Trail right near that Fayetteville Street crossing. And obviously, I think a lot of us are going to guess that that's going to be a non-starter for parents as it currently stands. And so, there's those safety aspects that we've got to think about, right? It's very different when I'm biking on that versus a bunch of elementary school students who are trying to walk to school and go through an area like that. So something to think about. And that's all I've got. I do want to say that I will share out. I've got in my personal Google Drive a folder that I've created where I've got like a school folder, now just CC Spalding, and I've got these maps saved plus this presentation. And then I would take notes about, follow-up information that I get from like the principal and stuff like that for each of these schools for specific things. That way, like, we can reference this and maybe like figure out commonalities or the specific needs for individual schools. So if people want to contribute to that, I'm happy to share it. I'm also happy to move all this to like the BPAC space. I kind of initially started this talking to some folks with Bike Durham. So I think there's a lot of interest there. So we should consider, how we rope in enough people and activate all those resources.
Yeah, great.
That's all I got.
Chris, thank you so much for the time you put in on this and for that presentation. For the sake of time, I am going to move on. Let's table any discussion to the next meeting because we have other things we need to get done tonight, and I want to land this plane on time. So thank you for that. It also sounds like the school board's going to decide on a policy for sure at the next meeting. So we'll have more to react to in a month's time. And Kristen, I just wanted to give you a quick chance if you had anything you wanted to add at the end of that.
Thanks. And I hear you on the time constraint. I really appreciate the interest in this topic and the willingness to help. And I think I'm happy to come back in January and February, whatever it is, to coordinate efforts and make sure schools aren't, there's going to hopefully be lots of offers to help and just not getting ones that overlap or redundant, or, to just streamline things and decide what can be done by the school district, what can be done by, community groups. And have that conversation once we have more details from the board. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Hannah, you have something for us to do, which shouldn't take too long.
Yes. So hopefully everyone's still awake and everything. If you would turn on your cameras, for the annual report, we have to have we don't have to, but we have in the past always done a group picture of the commission. And so I'd like to take a group picture of everyone. The last couple of times other people have been able to do this. So I'm going to see if I can figure it out. Okay.
You can close the chat box and use print screen, right?
What do you do?
If you want to close anything, you don't want to be on the photo. So maximize the Zoom window. Close the chat box.
Brian, I'm on an iPad, so I could do a screenshot too once we have everyone.
You could also do that.
Yeah, whatever's
Gallery.
easiest.
How about that?
There's a gallery view.
Yes, I'm on there now. All right. Is everyone that is participating in the picture have their camera on?
I'm good, right?
Yep, you're good, Ed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, let me.
I'm gonna turn the brightness up a little bit. Yeah, we can see you, Ed. I don't want to call people out. It's whatever floats your boat. I'm seeing a quorum of us. There's a BPAC word. Have our faces on our cameras. So I'm going to go ahead and screenshot. All right. Okay. Are we ready for this? All right. BPAC on 3. 1, 2, 3. BPAC. Perfect. Great job, everyone. Hannah, I'll go ahead and email that to you.
Perfect.
And I'm going to post that on the social media as part of the annual report, if that's cool with everyone.
Absolutely.
Sounds great. Well, that was easy. That's all I wanted.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Okay, I think this gets us to liaison reports. And Commissioner Jacobs has not joined us yet, so that takes us to you, Carl.
Sorry about that. Yeah, there was a big chamber event tonight. She may still be stuck in the chamber holiday party. So just I know our time is running short. Just a couple of quick highlights. There's a lot of planning stuff going on. I wanted to highlight. A lot of you are probably aware of this stuff. Some of you are involved in some of these processes, but I just want to highlight a couple of those. So one is the Durham to Roxborough Rail Trail Advisory Committee has just launched. And so that process is underway. We've got consultants that are on board. They're going to start doing some engagement soon. So that process is underway, which is exciting. There's also, as you probably know, the bike and walk plan that was last done, I think, in 2017 is now being updated as of 2025. The reason this, it's good to update these plans regularly anyway, but the reason this is particularly important is that the last bike and walk plan was only a city plan. So this new bike and walk plan is going to be a city-county plan jointly, which I think makes much more sense for the community. Also means there's funding from the county as well as the city that could be going to this as well. So it's a good strategy for our community generally that we're doing this bike and walk plan together. So that's kind of launching. And actually, you only have seen some of the flyers about that. There's been some community meetings going on some have already taken place. The next one's going to be on January the 16th at the Avila Center, way up on Mason Road, if you guys know where that is, in the evening from 6 to 7:30. There's also, if you go to the bike and walk plan section of the transportation or the city website, there's also a survey you can take if you're interested in taking the survey. So that process is kind of launched and it's exciting to kind of get that underway. The next thing is, I know none of you have been involved in the Reimagining Durham Freeway study, which is not technically, I mean, it's more a freeway, but it's also a lot of it relates to sort of building connections, rebuilding connections between communities with sidewalks and bike paths and so forth. So that process is wrapping up their phase 2 of engagement. Oh, thanks, Hannah, for the link in there. So they're wrapping up phase 2 of engagement on the reimagining Durham freeway study, and they're moving into a process in 2025 that's going to be looking at alternatives for the council to consider. So the next step is to start thinking about what are the options that we're looking at. I don't know what those might look like. I imagine freeway caps, for example, is probably part of that. I think also just kind of reconnecting communities with who've lost connections through sidewalks and bike paths and so forth. So that's an exciting thing for Durham generally, given the long and ugly history of the freeway being a real scar across our city. The last thing is I wanted to note that I have talked to Wade Walcott at DPR about the letter we sent about like the e-bikes and the sort of the changing the ordinances regarding e-bikes and greenways. So I think we've got a meeting set up for a bunch of, I think Mary Rose, you're involved in that, and Nathan, I think it's like later in January with Wade and his staff at DPR. So we're moving that process along. So again, thanks for your work in bringing that issue forward, and we're just kind of moving that through the channels within the city. Those are the main highlights. There's a whole lot of things going on, and that we've now got the bonds are approved. Last night we actually certified them. So, we need to be moving quickly, and y'all need to hold us accountable for making sure that we move quickly on all the stuff that we're going to fund through the bonds. So stay tuned for more of that.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Nathan, do you have anything from Duke?
Nothing from Duke. We're going to have a meeting next month.
Okay, great. And Royal is not here. Mary Rose, Vision Zero.
Yeah, so Vision Zero is still underway. We have another meeting. Coalition has another meeting that's going to be scheduled for the second week of January. And the original plan was to have something ready to present to council in January, have it ready by the end of December, present to council in January. That has now been postponed at least a month, possibly 2 months, but it's still going to be before anything is due. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at. Okay. For the Vision Zero action plan.
Right.
Hey Rose, any sense of what's taking longer on that plan? I was hoping to see that by the end of the year.
I'm not sure. We're currently reviewing the draft action plan. So I don't know what initially delayed it, aside from maybe just, I know we were hoping to coordinate with I believe the NPO on their high injury network. So it might have been that we were just waiting to get the results from theirs back. I don't know entirely what the delay was. But yeah, they're currently out for comments. Today was is the last day for the coalition to submit comments for the draft. And then so it might just be holidays and stuff that's kind of continuing the delay.
Okay, thanks. Let's see, this gets us to the committees. Community engagement, I can take this for Hannah. She sent me basically a quick update that they spent a good bit of time on the CIP discussion, which we've already been over. Also mentioned that there's a new collaboration they're trying to get going with Bull City Running, who does a lot of group runs around here, which I think is a pretty cool potential connection point that I don't think we've made before. So we'll be hearing more about that in the coming months. Scott, you want to give us a recap of DevRev, please?
Yes. So DevRev, we covered 7 plans, several new ones, and just to hit a few highlights. So there's one called Sagebrook, which is off I-85 in Northeast Durham, 17 acres, 121 townhomes. And then there's another one, Fayetteville Flats, that was adjacent to Hillside High. So it's more of an infill kind of development. It's 9.7 acres and 220 apartments. And so it's, right beside Hillside and Mount Zion Academy. There's another one in that same area called Odyssey at RTP that's off of Bell Green, which is near Soul Light Park, off the American Tobacco Trail. And it's 7 acres and has 110 townhomes. So it's also filling in on, kind of an empty space there, but way within city limits. Another development is called Heartland Park. This was the 4th revision. It's off Sharon Road out in 98. It's 13 acres and 78 single family homes. And then there's one called 303 US 70 Warehouse, which actually is one of the few industrial ones that we saw, and we didn't really have any comments to that. It's not got residents and it's not really convenient for biking ped stuff to anywhere. So that was one of the few that we didn't really have any comments on. The next one, 401 East Lakewood. This one is right across from the Hayti Heritage Center, bounded by Fayetteville, Lakewood, Moorhead, and Roxborough. And so Trent, who's just getting ramped up on DevRev, he took that one. And so it's going to be basically the conversion of a shopping center now that has a food world in it and a lot of parking space into a mixed use development. And then finally, Creekside Mixed Use is off of Anger and 70 near I-885, and it's 75 acres and will be 630 townhomes. So the recurrent theme here is a lot of townhomes and growth in the northeastern part of Durham, some off of I-85 and some off 98 Sharon Road, kind of out in that section. As we've discussed, typically we're asking for multi-use paths along the frontage and then internal raised crosswalks and signalized pedestrian crossings where there's stoplights and so on. We have sort of pretty consistent things that we ask for, and but I guess the point is there are a lot of developments going on. We've also gotten, I think, 6 new ones in the last week, so we'll have more to talk about in January. That's it.
Great, thank you very much. Nathan, PNP.
All right. We talked about some stuff. We talked about having the MPO come do a couple presentations for us later in the year related to Unified Planning Work Program and a summary of all the current projects planned or underway in Durham under the current Transportation Improvement Plan. I was going to reach out to them. I would like volunteers to take those 11 projects that were highlighted in the sidewalk bond and find them on the website and find out who their project managers are and email those project managers and ask them what the status currently is, and now that you have money, what the new timeline is. So I would prefer not to do that myself and would like volunteers. We talked about the ATT homeless encampment at Fayetteville. We just kind of spitballed ideas such as convince parks to heavily landscape the area and eliminate the bald spots, make it look nice and desirable to the community. Find a way to add lighting through the streetlight program. The intersection itself is also garbage and is a part of the Fayetteville Transit Emphasis Corridor. So maybe we could tie that project into getting money to improve the area, making sure the signal actually works and have the crossing signal be automatic and have pushing the button actually change the cycle, which it doesn't seem like it does a lot of the time now. The UDO is currently being updated. They're currently releasing drafts. I would like for everyone to go and review what they have currently. There'll be more for us to comment on later. Right now, they're mostly just doing zoning, but it's still important for this commission to look at everything that they're doing from the lens of one of their goals, which is promote transit-oriented and pedestrian-friendly development patterns. And as you're looking at everything, ask yourself, does this do that? And then I kind of would like us to have a big response to maybe just the zoning, but at least the actual rules afterwards of maybe an official, these are what BPAC's official big comments on these things where we would like to see improvements. And that's it.
Thank you. 2 things. One, I'll channel Ideal here because she's really good at this. If you want volunteers to look at the sidewalk plans make a spreadsheet, push it out on email, and bug everybody till it's full. 2, are you meeting on January 2nd?
Oh, we did not discuss that. Are we?
I
I'd like
can't
to
think of a
not.
better way to ring in the new year.
Mary would like to not. Anyone else who regularly attends, would you like to not, or would you like to, Chris?
I can go either way. If y'all don't want to do it, that's fine.
John? No preference, okay. I'll send out an email, and if I get responses, I'll let the responses decide, and if I don't, then I'll decide on my own whim.
If you do cancel, please let Hannah know as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Cool. I think that gets us to announcements and updates. I have one, which is the consensus date for the retreat appears to be February 1st. I know that's not good for everybody, but it's good for the most people on the most time slots. So I think that's where we're at. Hannah, did you actually get the space in City Hall nailed down yet?
Yeah, so I reserved the same space that we used last year, the Innovation Lab. And yeah, we should be good to use that space. If we want to do a different area though, obviously we don't have to use City Hall, but it just seemed like logistically that would be maybe the easiest. So we can keep that as a backup if you all still want to pursue something else, but we're on the books for there, so.
Okay, thank you. So please block off on your calendars midday on February 1st. Details to follow. I think that's it. Does anybody else have any other announcements? Going on. Okay, here are the priorities coming out that I see. We already mentioned the retreat. One action from me, Hannah, Mary Rose, and Trent, we should probably have a transition meeting sometime in the next little bit. I'll email you guys about availability. I know it's tricky with holidays potentially, but let's try to find a time to talk through some stuff. Certainly well ahead of the next monthly meeting. We're punting on the November minutes, so those will be added onto the agenda next month. Chris, you've got that. And I'll do a first run at a first draft of the CIP bullet points and push that out. Did I miss anything? Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to throw out, I asked Hannah about this. I'm going to go ahead and make a folder in the planning and policy space on in the BPAC Google Drive and move the stuff that I have for CC Spalding in there. That way everybody has access to it and we can add to it, figure out what we want to do with it, do more schools if we want to do more schools, that kind of thing. Also give us a place to maybe document some of this information that we have that's maybe not as documented yet before it gets there, so we can stay involved with like planning stuff related to that.
Okay. Anything else?
We had talked back in November this is December, about having Bike Durham come into, excuse me, do a presentation about their travel or transit training program. And are we considering that or willing to consider that for the January regular monthly meeting?
So they said since it's a relatively new training, they are not ready to do something on Zoom. But they would be ready by March.
Cool.
So we could have it in March.
Thanks.
Yep. And I believe we're trying to have Lauren do.
Yeah, actually, you know what? I meant to ask you when you were talking about that. Does Lauren's timeline on Vision Zero action plan mean she may not want to talk to us in January?
I think she'd still want to talk to us.
Okay. I know she was willing to talk to us before it was done, which I think is fine.
Yeah, I think she had already decided that it wasn't going to be
okay
done. Yeah.
Okay.
When we had initiated conversations.
That sounds right to me.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Anything else? If not,
I got one more thing.
Oh.
For the Durham Freeway, let's tear it down and restore the grid. Carl brought it up earlier and I wanted to make clear that's the best option.
Noted for the record.
Second.
All right.
Cool. Thank you, everybody, for entrusting me to steer this boat for you this year. I really appreciate all the help I've gotten from all of you. It's been an honor and a privilege. And I'm not going anywhere, so I'm not going to linger on that point. I'm just handing the reins over. So everybody have a happy holidays, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks for your
All right.
leadership. Great job, Brian.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Fantastic timing. Goodbye.
There's gonna be no